Hello, audience. Welcome to the 2020 series presented by the New York Film Academy. The 2020 series are conversations with creative visionaries about craft, creativity, and collaboration. I have wonderful guests. They're super exciting. I learned so much. I hope you guys will learn stuff too today. We're going to have 20 minutes of shop talk and then 20 minutes of potentially answering lots of questions from you, the global audience. So please write in the Q&A. Today we have a brilliant screenwriter who also is a story architect. And I would love to present to you guys Tom Schlesinger. Hello, Tom. And I
Hey there,
totally
Liz.
bastardized your name. I knew it, Schlesinger.
You did a good job, Liz.
I knew it. I knew it. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Good to see you, Liz.
So I want to do a little preamble. We've been talking a lot about, what is it to be a screenwriter, but also this other idea, this collaborative idea of what is it to be a story architect. And I would love you to tell us in your mind what a story architect is and what they do. And then we're going to give an example of how you formed this amazing documentary film, Prom Night in Mississippi.
Yeah, I would say that the role of a story architect, Liz, is to really kind of work with the creative team, work with the filmmaker and the team to kind of help them visualize what the film could be when it's finished. And it's almost like it's a bit of a kind of shamanic ritual of kind of a vision quest. But what I've been finding in working with many creative teams and working on my own projects is that when the team has a shared vision of what the project can be like and starts to actually visualize it, it really kind of creates an optimal kind of creative synergy with the team. And so a lot of that time, a lot of it's intuitive, but whether I come in when the script is being written or when the film's being shot, or oftentimes in documentaries during the editing process, part of that really has to do with suggesting designs. So it's like the rendering of an architect's blueprint in a
Mm.
sense. And I just find that the more we do this kind of as a team, as a group, like I've just worked with a BIPOC writer's room, the more you can really kind of visualize, the more guidance you have than when you're going from script to screen to editing to broadcast.
And how do you feel like, because you come in, say you came in as a screenwriter and you're in one lane, do people, have you ever done it where you're in the screenwriter and you're also a story architect, and is when you're jumping a different lane, do people listen to you differently?
Well, I've just realized, in the last years, how important it is for screenwriters to get involved also as producers, even if it starts as an associate producer or something like that. So that it just, in the old days, the screenwriter sometimes would write the script. When the film was being shot, they would be, sent off to the Gulag or someplace like that because they didn't want them there. Although there were, Billy Wilder and IAL Diamond were famous in the collaboration. But I think so that there isn't like such a differentiation of roles that by, creating a kind of writer's room experience, which is what I do when I come into a project, and following some of the rules of improv, like everybody in the writer's room, while we're visualizing and developing the story, is supporting everyone else to do their best work. So it kind of gets out of those kind of ego conflicts that could come up, if you're working with a auteur.
So you're really actually on the cutting edge, because we've been in such a paradigm, what they were calling the Piscean paradigm of like this, I work for you, you work on me, or I step on your head, you step on my head. We're up this ladder. So the screenwriter's under the director, they're
Mhm.
under the producer. So what I'm hearing you say is now, why more so is it important for the screenwriter to come in as a producer? Is it to protect their idea, or is it to bring a deeper level of collaboration, or where do you see that happening?
Well, it's two things. One, it's a deeper level of collaboration, but for so many years and so many of my friends who are screenwriters, there was this frustration of, what are they going to do to my baby? Or they bring a rewriter in or something like that. So I think that, today and the way that things are evolving and changing as you're talking about, it's really important to kind of create these teams and work together in collaboration, in such a way that it's not like I'm the screenwriter and I know best. So you get everybody on the same page, so the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
But and let me ask you this, but why? Why now is it why are we stepping away from, say, the Scorsese auteur or the, you know, um, it's always been about having the vision and the person, that one person with the vision, Christopher Nolan, Darren Aronofsky, that one, and we almost never know actually who else is involved, honestly,
Yeah.
besides that. And so why now in this era do you feel like it's more of a Aquarian process, of more of a collaborative voice going on?
Well, I mean, in the biggest picture, I would say that as a part of the evolution of our consciousness, we're kind of moving from the individual, like in the hero's journey, really reflecting on their own shadow and kind of moving out in this kind of and branding, the stars along the way. It was kind of part of all that. But in terms of what's happening now in the world, as I'm experiencing it and kind of seeing it, is kind of we're moving towards more of what's called a heroine's journey approach, where it's really about finding a tribe or a community or a creative team where you can express your voice in a vulnerable way and have it supported. So change that's happening now is, I think, moving with away from the focus on the individual, which still has to be there, but it's moving more towards the kind of transformation and healing of families and communities. And so that for me is how it gets reflected in the creative process.
Devil's advocate, but do the stories get diluted because then you have you have to have a mass agreement on, say, a character, a story point, or an ending?
Not on my watch, Liz. You really create a kind of environment so it doesn't become, my idea is the best, or, it's like I'm staying with the idea. And of course, in the creative process, friction is, you have to allow there to be friction and kind of disagreement. But certainly, like in a film, when you start to get into things like casting and there's rewrites and all of that, at a certain point someone has to make the final decision, which may be the director, producer on things,
Mhm.
or the studio that they're kind of working with. But in my experience, especially I would say in the last 12 years, that when I'm involved in a team, it's kind of like I'm a development showrunner with the
Mhm.
team. I've worked with people before, we've built up trust, and I am just as open to new ideas as everyone else is. So I think that I just see how it works in a very magical way, because everybody wants to tell a great story. And if you're telling a story that's transformational, that it's going to help the audience kind of see dramatic and thematic issues in a different way, everyone wants to be on board with that, to have that combination of entertainment and transformation, or having a deeper meaning in the stories.
And that's what we were talking about before, which is what social impact entertainment. And tell me how you've came. Is this something you came up with, or is this like a movement that's happening?
Well, it's been a movement that's been happening since the hero's journey and heroine's journey kind of came out, which is really all about transformational storyteller. But I think the real visionary in that is Jeff Skoll, who started Participants Media, and he also has kind of created these departments at Oxford and UCLA that is the social impact entertainment. There's something that everyone could check out. It's one of their websites is thestateofsie.com, and it's phenomenal. I mean, I've been studying, I studied with Joseph Campbell and Gene Houston and
Mm.
then Maureen Murdoch, and it's kind of like you have visionaries like Jeff Skoll that are doing these things. It feels a little bit like a miracle that there's a whole kind of global movement in embracing storytelling as a one way for social change.
And this site is referring to what?
So the department at UCLA and the department at Oxford is
Mhm.
really called Social Impact Entertainment, and there's
Wow.
there's an amazing report about it, and basically it's saying that great stories that have social impact can also do incredibly well at the box office, like Milk or Spotlight, Hidden Figures, and movies like that. Because a lot of people think, oh, that's an art film, it's not going to make money. You know, we have to do the next blockbuster. You know, those can be fun, but now that it's a report that took 2 years to develop, that's really showing that no, people really want to watch meaningful stories and be entertained at the same time.
That's great, and that's where you conduit in, and so that's a great segue to. I would love to show the trailer to your prom night in Mississippi, and then talk about how you came in as the story architect in that project. So Charlie, so we'll put our screens away, Tom, and then Charlie will play the trailer.
Okie doke.
Charleston, Mississippi has got to get over the racism.
There's some hard-headed people in this town. I'm not just saying whites or blacks. I'm saying a little bit of both.
My first reaction to her was like, she's white. My parents gonna freak out.
I can't get a job in some places in town because I have black friends.
Why are you still going back to this same attitude that you had 50 years ago?
I guess you'd consider me a redneck. I don't change for nobody.
These are shackles. These are still chains we have around our souls. One of the things that surprised me most was the fact that they have separate proms. One white, one black. How stupid can that be?
The white parents wanted us to go to the white prom this year. Why act like that? I mean, they were our prom.
So I have this proposal. You don't want to have a prom instead of 2 or 3? I'll pay for it. Deal?
What's our limit?
What's your limit? $200.
When there's a chance for you to make a change, why not take it?
Our town is changing a little part of the world right now.
Why would you want to have a prom separate? They stupid.
I don't see what everybody's problem is. It's supposed to be equal.
I think we might have a little problem.
As far as I'm concerned, they can kiss my ass.
I've just learned to love people for who they are and not for the color of their skin.
If it's left up to the kids, it's gonna be fine.
I want y'all to understand, y'all making history.
Oh, that's so great, Tom. Yay. So how did you told me a really interesting story about how it became to be this film about the prom night, and if you could like tell the audience that. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, well, first of all, the film was produced and directed by a lifelong friend of mine that I've worked on many projects with, Paul Saltzman at Sunrise Films in Toronto. So we have a kind of a whole history of kind of trusting each other. And originally, Paul was going down to look at how the civil rights movement had changed since he was down there in 1963 in Mississippi. And so during the course of that filming, I was checking in remotely and kind of seeing what they were doing to start to get a sense of how the film could be designed. And then at a certain point, he showed me some footage that he had taken when he interviewed Morgan Freeman, who Morgan Freeman said there's a separate white and black prom. And I tried to, have an integrated prom some years ago, and I'm thinking about trying it again to do it now. So when I heard that, from kind of an architect's point of view, it's like, especially in documentary, when you find a narrative drive, it's really time to break out the champagne, because that's really what's going to engage the audience. And so my suggestion at that time was, kind of stop doing this kind of general view of civil rights, move to this little town of Charleston and start filming, because the prom's going to happen in 3 months. So, every narrative drive starts out with raising a big question. It's like, so will they have the integrated prom for the first time in this town? It's like, I get really excited about these things. So that's part of what the architect does. It helps you find the through line. It's going to engage the audience, especially on an emotional level.
Well, with that type of project, though, just even the nuts and bolts, like they've been budgeted, or they were starting to film, or they were doing something already. And that's like turning the Titanic, making a hard left, because now we're doing something specific. We have to find all these new characters to interview, stuff like that. How was there steps that it just a conversation, one conversation you had, or was it did you have to write up a document to get people behind this idea?
Well, first of all, Paul's a brilliant filmmaker, and he's made many successful documentaries. So it was kind of, let me just say this, that there comes a point in every project where it looks like everything's falling apart and it's not going to work. And that's usually when the kind of pristine vision like this will come up. So that was kind of the first step. It was like, it's a little easier for the architect. It's like, Paul, drop everything and move down there for three months, and I'll look at the footage. And then the second part of it, of course, is there was over 150 hours of footage that needed to go down to 90 minutes. So then it's like, well, how are we going to design this film? And what came out of that was that he was brilliantly following a dozen students. And out of that, there were two that I found to be very profound. The white girl and the black girl that's in the film. And the design of it was to follow they had complete narrative arcs. So to follow both of their narrative arcs in tandem, for the audience then to have a very deep and profound emotional experience. And the other thing we did was that we kind of teased those arcs at the beginning. So this beautiful, brilliant black girl says, I was going to be I was valedictorian, but they took it away from me because I was black. This happens in the opening 5 minutes. So this is a part of the architect work. It's really design work. And of course you try it out during the editing, but that turned out to be a winning design for this film.
That's amazing. And, and what we've been talking about as well is that the amount of writing, and I'd just like you to talk about that goes into a documentary. And what does that mean? There's writing in a documentary. Is it the proposal? Where are you sort of placing that?
Well, we had a conversation where I said that when Prom Night came out and premiered at Sundance, it was during the Barack Obama inauguration. So there was a tremendous amount of buzz about the film, that the Writers Guild was starting to recognize screenwriters being involved in documentaries. And it was always kind of a gray area, because the screenwriting wasn't just writing the cards, it was really designing the structure. And you can find articles kind of about all of this. So you're not writing a script per se. You're kind of, as you've made films, you create kind of a shooting schedule and what you're going to capture and all these kind of things. And I think that as a story architect, it's easier because I'm removed from that process and kind of looking down. So the screenwriting in documentary films, I think, mostly has to do with creating the design and the structure of the piece.
And so do you enjoy going back and forth between, say, being the solo creative, the singular voice screenwriter, and then the more collaborative story architect or coach, it's almost like?
Yeah, because usually writing is a very solitary profession. So after like 6 months, I'm really getting tired of myself and I'm ready to be with the group. But that said, Liz, now I have there's 3 feature film projects I've written for Paul Saltzman, and in each one of them, and then new projects that are coming out right now, I enter into it with an understanding that we're going to use what I call the writer's room experience, which you can see on my website, tomschlesinger.com, that's the agreement that we make. And it goes into the contract that this is a writer's room and we're collaborating, and this is kind of how it's going to function. So I don't do the solo thing. And a lot of my friends in, working with studios here are very much doing the solo thing, and then they get notes and all that. But for me, I'm just more of a communal person. And so I do my best work when, you know, everything I've worked on has been a true story. So you have the people who are in the story, you've got the producers, any, you know, you can bring an editor in and all of that, because I want to hear what everybody has to say about it rather than working for 4 months and then getting indecipherable notes.
about 3 drafts ago too. Exactly. That's amazing. And it must, I've seen that in some acting workshops where they brought in the DP and stuff like that with the cast. So everybody feels like you're creating a new tribe. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of questions here that people want to know. Pick your brain. So Emily asks, how do you write a good story?
So I think that the most important thing, and I could, in talking to my kind of A-list studio screenwriters, everybody says the same thing. First of all, Emily, you have to give yourself permission to write a shitty first draft. Because I think the real inner obstacle for screenwriters is perfectionism. And, you know, and the other thing is, of course, there are certain things, once you kind of get the story, like for me, you've got to get the paint out on the canvas before you can really work with it. You know, it's also it's kind of like sculpting. So once you kind of do that, then there are some simple things to look at in terms of how stories function. So I'll just mention one thing, that what I've found in all my projects and that I've worked on, and even films that I really like, there typically is a dilemma for the main character where they have to choose between two things that have positive values. That's something that John Truby talks about. And it's usually between an outer goal that relates to some kind of passion or freedom and a certain kind of family or relationship obligation. So once you get the paint on the canvas, you can start looking at what is my main character's dilemma and how is that going to get played out dramatically.
Very good. Everybody should be taking notes. This is very helpful, like getting to the point. So Sam asks, how would you say you go about designing a story to fit around a certain genre? Whether you are requested to fit that genre or you want to tell a story in that genre. And we were talking about that's part of your genius, is understanding how genres work.
Right. If you go on that social impact entertainment site, there's one of the filmmakers is Reginald Hudlin, who did Marshall, and he's talking about working with diversified casts, about, you know, creating, you know, like BIPOC stories and all that. And the last thing that he says, and if you really want to reach a wide audience, use a genre. So, and I also remember another thing that John Truby said, that genres are the most popular form of storytelling in the world. But you need to kind of learn how they function, because every genre functions in a different way. So if you're using some kind of formula dramaturgy for screenwriting and you're writing a thriller, it's not going to work, because in thrillers, for example, the story is driven forward by the plans and actions of the antagonist. So for me, I'm passionate about genre storytelling, and it's not about fitting the story into a genre. It's like, it's understanding the rules, and most of the rules have to do with how the characters in the character web relate to each other. So there's a lot that's written on genre, and the other thing I want to say about that, Sam, is that rather than pick a genre that's popular right now, like maybe moving towards romantic comedy or love story or something like that, for me, genres are really based on how you see the world, how you perceive the world, where you find meaning. So for me, a lot of the meaning I find is through family or surrogate families, but you might find meaning through, you know, really exploring the cosmos, and you might want to be going into science fiction or thrillers. So it's not about picking the right genre. It's like, genre for me is based on how you see and perceive the world, where you find meaning.
So but let me ask you this. So you're interested, say, in family genre, but is that because it comes naturally to you, or because there's a question that there's something you're trying to solve, and that's why that's the most shiny object of the genres for you?
Well, you know, for example, family drama, is not just about biological families, it's also about surrogate families. And television series oftentimes have a character web that gets repeated episode after episode. In a sense, they're really like a surrogate family. But for me, I mean, even in Prom Night in Mississippi, it's a serious subject and humor comes into it. And that's kind of what my family was like, you know, that there was a lot of, you know, everybody, I don't even know why they say dysfunctional family, because it seems to be repetitious, but you know, what's a functional family? It's like, I'm from a dysfunctional family. It's like, so is everyone else. But because there was humor that would kind of relieve tension at times or kind of bring the family together or something, then that became the genre that I was most interested in. And I'm just fascinated by family drama. I mean, it's, you know, the whole idea is to kind of take the dysfunctional family and put it into your characters and then have a healthy family.
Create the world that you want to be in, basically.
Yeah.
That type of thing, or want to experience. Right. That's great, Tom. And so Pedro asks, while the world changes so much politically, environmentally, socially, including in film and TV segments, so quickly, how do you see the role of a storyteller in the society in the near future?
Well, I think that, you know, and this is something that goes across the board. So I'll just tell kind of a quick story. Like during the pandemic, I was working with writers' rooms, but also like with my family. We had people that we knew that were very close to us that got very sick, were in crises and all that. And we formed a circle around them, you know, virtually. And we, in a sense, what we were doing was kind of creating visions for their health. And so, and this is something that I think that storytellers will be doing more and more, that you can work within a genre and attract a big audience because it's entertaining, but there's also the possibility of creating kind of transformational characters and stories that will have social impact, which gets back to social impact entertainment. And I also want to mention there's an amazing community of visual storytellers called See Good TV. That's the URL, because community is a big part of that. I mean, what I'm finding is that I'm really becoming the best storyteller I've ever been because of community support.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting. And which is funny and interesting, because a lot of that, the community and tribe concept, you know, it is either very ancient or very now. And that's where I want to, because we all went down the line of the auteur, and can you just tell me from your point of view, where do you think being just the auteur, like say storyteller or filmmaker, maybe not be as work as well in this time and day?
Well, I think that the one thing we need to keep in mind, that sometimes they're the kind of calling somebody an auteur, sometimes that auteur is the one that's taking responsibility for the film or series to get made, like a showrunner or something like that. So, you know, it gets a little bit kind of out of hand when it becomes the personality of the auteur or this and that. So I think that it's kind of like the focus for storytellers is kind of shifting from a certain kind of self-centered focus, moving towards a group-centered focus.
No, I think and there is, I think it's also as we get older, there's also the balance of life and work,
right?
Which, you know, and the group centered, having community, having a tribe, having compatriots in the field with you is necessary. Otherwise, I've always found that filmmaking, screenwriting is a lonely sport.
That is for sure. Yeah. So creating a storytelling tribe, and there's a number of them that I'm in right now. One in this See Good TV, a group we call Story Voyagers. It's like you're able to really support each other while maintaining your own personal vision and working on your projects. But I definitely think that there's something very ancient about it, and that's why now I've kind of put most of my focus on Maureen Murdoch's heroine's journey, because that's what it's really about, that the initiation into your deeper self now is happening more in community.
Exactly, and because it's accepted more, because you can actually show your vulnerability
That's
in
exactly
the world.
right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You find your voice and express it within a supportive tribe, and it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, to be seen and to be seen fully.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. So on craft, and I've been very curious about this. Sandra asked, thank you, Sandra. How do you outline your stories, and how long does it take you to write a complete story?
So I always start out, and this is also something I put into my contract, I always start out with a step outline, because I want everybody to be on the same page with the structure, because you could spend weeks and months trying to find the right structure. And with the step outline, you can do that. And then and this is something that came up with this wonderful Canadian BIPOC writers room, is that with the step outline, then you also kind of work on like a one-page synopsis. And then the real test is when you create a log line. So in developing a story, even before I start writing, I create a step outline, which is basically the story without the dialogue and all the description and things like that. And then from that, I start to kind of it's part of the kind of the visioning. I already start with thinking about how can I break that down into a synopsis and a log line. And for me, a log line really captures the heart and soul of the project. So once I have that, then I start the writing. And what I find is that if you have at least a tentative structure to begin with, that it really frees up your intuition when you're writing, and wonderful things can happen in doing that.
And how do you go about writing on a deadline?
I try to keep my deadlines as loose as possible, because and I try to look at them as terms of lifelines rather than deadlines. But I think especially in the past, that would be the main motivation. It's like, if I don't get this done on time, I'm going to get fired.
School of fear.
That's
exactly.
right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But because I've been building relationships internationally over the years, and when we're kind of working together, if I say I need to go down deeper, like there's a project I've been developing for a few months, and at a certain point, I realized that we were working in the wrong genre, and I needed to kind of go deeper into it. So when you're working in a creative team, if you need more time and you have a good reason for doing it, then you can kind of loosen up some on the deadlines.
Yeah, I mean, but do you find does that hamper your writing at I mean, is your process something that you want to sort of vomit it out very quickly, or you like to gesticulate? Like what would be your ultimate timeline, let's say, on a project?
Well, I'm a morning person, so I do all the main work in the morning and kind of get through all of that. So a timeline might be 2 months to write the step outline and start moving towards synopsis and log line, and then probably 2 months for each draft of the script. Something like that. So I mean, in the end, because as you even like projects now that are getting financed and we're reaching out to talent and kind of things like that, as soon as somebody new comes on, it's time to do another rewrite. But as far as having what might be called a show script to raise money, it's usually a 6 to 9 month process.
Yeah, and it's the fast, cheap, and good, right? If you're gonna.
Yeah, I mean, some writers are super fast, and others can take a couple of years, to write great scripts.
And so like, say you're starting a new project, do you research a genre more? Like, where do you go to start opening up your creativity and your intuition?
Well, and this has been a process that's been developing over the years, but I really create what I call the source material. And with the source material, it's all of the research. Almost every project I've worked on has been based on a true story, virtually every one of them. So it's a lot of interviewing, it's a lot of research, and you kind of develop all this source material, and you know, look at character arcs and things like that. But it's really from the source material then that what I do is I kind of look at what are the archetypal streams that are running through. Like, what are the archetypal themes? Is there like a myth or a fairy tale that provides a template for this? So from that source material, then when it gets really kind of developed comprehensively, and you know what the kind of universal themes and relationship arcs and the such are in the story, then it becomes really a platform to create maybe a film, a television series, a web series that it's really developing that source material. So it's like a deep dive into, you know, researching, interviewing, and things like that. And then looking at, okay, what are some of the archetypal themes or universal themes that are running through here?
That's great. Well, that's a great breakdown for all of us to understand that. There's a question here from someone's name I cannot pronounce, honestly. I'm not gonna even try it. How do you make a story into a script? If I write a story in prose, how do I then make that into a film? Or I guess people get bogged down in the actual mechanics of the script writing.
Right, right. Well, the one thing I would say is that, you know, as best as you can, if a short story or a novel is kind of your source material, the real key, and you know, you maybe have even heard this, but it's really about what would it look like as a silent film. And because over the years, you know, the comment that I would make on scripts would always be, often would be, show, don't tell. So I think one of the first things to do, like we can't see what's going on inside of characters in film or TV series, whereas you can explore that in novels or prose. So you really want to kind of look at, okay, how can this be like, if this was a silent film, what would it look like? So that's kind of one of the main things to do. But I mean, like I said, you want to just blast out the first draft. So sometimes you could even take that short story or the novel that you've written and just put it into screenplay form, you know, where you have to have locations and when it takes place and, you know, essentially what's happening within each one of the scenes. But it's really kind of moving from, you know, introspection into visualization of the story.
Wow. You know, Tom, and I've never like enjoyed the screenwriting at all, but when I listen to you, it makes me want to go write my projects. So, you know, that's really, you're just incredibly inspiring and so gifted in your explanation of the work and the craft. And my last question is, in what have you learned from experiencing COVID? I mean, it was like as fantastical for a screenwriter because it's forcing you to be at home with your laptop.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I would say everything that we've been talking about, you know, I mentioned the See Good TV, which is a community of visual storytellers. It's like I woke up in the middle when the pandemic started in March, and I just had this question, why are we storytellers? And the answer that came was that in community to really visualize the world that we want. And so what's come out of it, you know, oddly enough, we can't physically be together, but because of Zoom and things like that, what I've learned is to build communities, to build stories. That's been the main thing. And it's been almost feeling like miraculous. It's really been the silver lining for me, to have these communities like the Story Voyagers and the BIPOC writers rooms and my family. I mean, that was like one of the greatest gifts of the pandemic was it brought my extended family together as storytellers.
Wow, that's amazing. So you already gave your website. So is there a way people can email you to ask, maybe not ask questions, but to reach out to you about things?
Yeah, through the website, it's tomschlesinger.com. I could write it in the.
I think we'll get it. Katie will pop it out there.
Yeah.
And that's it. This has been fantastic. There we go. Thank you, Katie. This has been fantastic and wonderful. And I know I learned so much, and I just really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Total pleasure, Liz. You know, you're one of my heroines. And, you know, I was just thinking the final comment is I think that, you know, I would offer to kind of interview you in a 2020 because your journey is amazing.
Thank you. And thank you, New York Film Academy, for giving us this platform so we can have geniuses like Tom share his knowledge, and we can all grow from that. And everyone be safe and have a great week. Bye,
Yep.
Tom.
Bye, Liz. Bye, everyone.